welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. I'm Stelios Katsakis, CEO of One Business World. The Leading Entrepreneurs of the World series is a series of digital presentations with leading entrepreneurs, investors, advisors, subject matter experts, and educators. Our goal is to provide the global business and entrepreneurial communities with a window into the minds of those who are shaping the future of the world. Today, we're very pleased to welcome leading entrepreneur, Julia Anthony. Julia is a founder and CEO of Solution Medical, a life sciences company developing more patient-friendly drug delivery systems for reconstitutable drugs. Together with its affiliates, Solution Medical focuses on advancing social medical device innovation, especially within the adrenal insufficiency sphere. More specifically, Julia and her team at Solution Medical are developing a drug delivery device for patient-injected medications that require mixing directly prior to injection. Solution Medical's beachhead market is a rescue auto-injector for individuals at risk of an adrenal crisis. In this session, Julia will host and coordinate a discussion with Dr. Mitchell Geffner and individuals and families living with adrenal disease from all around the world. Julia, it's a great pleasure and an honor to have you and your very fine guests here with us today to hear more about adrenal crisis and the importance of a universal design in efficiently dealing with the condition. Welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World.
Sawyers, thank you very, very much. So I'll just do a quick intro about myself because I want to get right into the exciting conversation with everyone we have here today on the call. So as Stelios mentioned, my name is Julia Anthony. I am the co-founder and CEO of Solution Medical, and we are a drug delivery company based in Philadelphia, focused on the human-facing aspects of medical products to provide users reassurance and life-saving care. A little background about myself. So prior to studying healthcare product design at Jefferson University and founding Solution, I worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and in corporate wellness here in the city. And I'm speaking with you here today because my brother and I have almost died multiple times throughout our lives. We were born with a rare genetic adrenal insufficiency condition where our bodies don't produce enough cortisol. And this puts us at risk for what's called an adrenal crisis, a life-threatening medical condition requiring immediate emergency treatment. Now, many rare diseases put patients at risk for an adrenal crisis or of an adrenal crisis. And like people at risk for anaphylaxis, adrenal disease, specifically adrenal insufficiency, sufferers must all carry rescue medication with them. However, we do not have the luxury of an EpiPen-like device. And this is because our life-saving medication requires 14 steps and multiple minutes to mix and administer. Now, certainly there are different formulations used throughout the world. The 14-step solution is the primary standard of care in most countries. However, even with these other drug formulations, there are a variety of problems and issues. So what we are doing at Solution Medical is we're solving this problem with a pre-filled single-use auto-injector that optimizes ease of use and actually mixes the life-saving medication 20 times faster than the current standard of adrenal crisis care. And with a simple twist of our device, we are able to mix the medication in only one user step instead of the current 14 that are required. So adrenal crisis is a global problem, and Solution Medical has developed a global solution. And I am incredibly excited today to have Dr. Geffner joining us and patients and families literally from all around the world to have a discussion about the global issues surrounding adrenal disease and specifically adrenal crisis care. So with that, I think we should start with introductions and get into some exciting conversation. Dr. Geffner, if you could give us your background, where you are located, with whom you work. I know these things, but our viewers do not. And then we'll get into introducing everyone else on the call.
My pleasure, Julia, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important project. I'm currently in my office in Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Here in Southern California. I'm a professor of pediatrics at the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California. I have been interested in adrenal disease probably from my entire career of about 40 years, maybe more so in the last 10 or 15. I co-run our congenital adrenal hyperplasia clinic here, which is one of the main conditions for which your product would be a lifesaver, literally. And I look forward to participating in today's session.
Thank you, Dr. Geffner. Jenna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Jenna Whaley Coura. I am from the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, and I'm the parent of a 5-year-old daughter with classical CAH. So I'm representing that perspective. I've also been heavily involved in the CAH community in the last few years, and I lead a support group for families and CAH patients who live in and around the Bay Area of California.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm just going in the order that I shared everyone's email addresses with Stelios, so nothing personal with the order of names. Ify, would you like to go next, where you're from, and a little bit of a background of your adrenal disease affiliation?
Okay, everyone, good afternoon. My name is Ify Aforka. I have 2 kids with classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, so it really has not been an easy journey for us here because I almost lost my son of a year plus last year. But with a little help from the doctors here, he's stable and I don't know if I should say eligible. He's okay now. So this is actually my first time of being in a community like this, and I'm glad. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear everything's okay now. I hope it stays that way. And maybe I missed it, Ify, but where are you calling in from?
Nigeria. Sorry, I'm calling from Nigeria, Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. Berryl, would you like to go next?
Hello, Julia. I'm Berryl Sawyers, and I am mother to a beautiful little girl. She's 8 years old, who is a salt waster. And my husband and I don't have the disease. She's adopted. So we had to learn a lot about CAH and how to take care of her. And she's really healthy. She's very sporty, very strong, assertive. She's doing great. I just would love for your device to succeed, because it's something that would make her life a lot easier. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
And where are you calling from?
Yeah, I'm in Singapore. I'm from Costa Rica, but I live in Singapore. Okay. And my husband's from Australia.
Ah, Sam, you might be neighbors with Beryl's husband, or former neighbors.
Hi,
we'll
Sam.
See. All right, Sam, would you like to go next?
Well, sure, thank you, and thanks, Julia, and everybody else. I'm Sam Iliades from Melbourne in Australia. I'm the CEO of the Australian Corporate Jet Centres Group, which has about 5 or 6 associated aviation businesses here in Australia. Also the CEO and founder of the Altitude Children's Foundation, which is there to raise awareness and funds for the Royal Children's Hospital and other organisations here in Australia for the endocrine department, which is a severely underfunded department here in Australia. And I have a child who has primary adrenal insufficiency Addison's disease, who's 9 years old. And I've been under the stress of having to give the emergency injection, and I know all about all the steps that Julia's talking about, and making sure that you get them right while you've got somebody who's quite stressed and love that you have to inject at the time. So I've been looking for a solution for a one-shot EpiPen style injection, and I've spoken to designers and medical people around the world. So very interested in this topic and what it could offer everybody.
Thank you, Sam. And it is the middle of the night where you are, so thank you for
It is.
yes.
Thank you.
Very, very much. Is Shaffali on the call Stelios? Has she joined us?
Not yet, Julia.
Okay. Last but certainly not least, Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm from the UK, and my daughter's got hyperpatriotism. She wasn't diagnosed until she was 14, so she was quite poorly when she was diagnosed. She's still very poorly now because she had spent so much time without medications. I started up an epi campaign in 2013 and have currently altogether got nearly 30,000 signatures on it. And I'm really happy to have found Julia so that we can kind of get this thing done together. Yeah, it's taken such a long time, and I've got an awareness group as well on Facebook, Molly's Miracle, and I just spend time raising awareness to you know, the dangers involved in going into a crisis. I've also had contacts with the NHS England, trying to get packs out to people who are newly diagnosed, just with information cards, an injection pack, maybe a band for a medical alert band, and to be red flagged as well with the ambulance trust. So yeah, just all these things have been happening since, I think it's about 8 years now that I've been doing this. So yeah, it's just really important, and it's nice that we're kind of all joined together now in trying to get the same goal that we all want, because it's very difficult. I find it really difficult to advocate this cause to people who haven't got, you know, any experience of it, and that's the main problem, is getting the problem out there and recognized. So yeah, and I don't know why you can't see me. Apparently my camera's not working.
No worries. We're glad you can make it. And thank you for being here and for everything you do. And to your point, Rachel, I think all of our voices are important. Our stories are important. Our experience is important. And by coming together for events like this and other events, we're able to use our collective voice to, you know, continue to make an impact. And this is incredibly exciting, because we're literally all based around the world. So this is tremendous. All right, so how I'm hoping and thinking this will happen is I'll just put a question out there. People can answer as you see fit and comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable answering, please don't feel like you have to. Dr. Geffner, I'm gonna ask sort of the patients and families a question first, and then given your pediatric background, I'm going to follow up with a specific question for you, if that's okay. And yeah, well, it's all conversational, and just feel comfortable to share what you wish. So the first topic or conversation I'm hoping to cover is how adrenal disease, and we have a few different, well, really the HPA axis, right? But how endocrine diseases have impacted each of your lives and your family's lives. This could, and some of you have already kind of touched on it a little bit, this could be the story of how diagnosis happens, issues with maintenance that you want to bring up, overcoming, for lack of a better term, and I don't love it, but difference, if you will, or rarity within communities that who may not understand that, or just day-to-day life. And because we have so many people on the call and everyone might want to share, try to make it an abbreviated story, because I know some of these stories can be tremendously long. So whoever wants to go first, have at it. I can also call on people if no one wants to volunteer.
I'll volunteer. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it someone else? Okay, I'll go first. My daughter was diagnosed through the newborn screening, the foot prick, and she was diagnosed at 4 days old. We were sent straight to Stanford Hospital, the Children's Hospital, about an hour away. We felt very fortunate because we had no idea what we were dealing with. And we were home just 4 days later. We had a lot of perspective in that NICU, like most people do, because our daughter was enormous, fully grown. She looked very healthy compared to the normal NICU baby. And it was all just a very confusing time. We've gone from dosing 3 times daily to 4 times, medicating 4 times daily. She gets blood draws every 3 months, visits her endocrinologist every 3 months, a lot of extra labs between for growth, when growth and lab results are not quite where we want them to be. And yeah, just preparing anyone who takes care of her to be fully trained in all emergency response is quite an exhausting endeavor. And we know just based on where we live that we're among the most privileged people in the world to be managing this condition, and it's still really hard. So that's how it is, at least our experience on the West Coast in the United States.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think Berryl, was it you who was chiming in? Would you like to go next?
Sure. So when we adopted our little girl, she was 8 months old, and we lived in China at the moment. And I think it's not that the disease was extremely rare. She already had the diagnosis, but I think that the way they treated it was just not right at the moment. So she was sometimes on a 3 times a day doses. Then they changed it to 2. Then we found out that the actual medication, the pills were, the half-life of the pills was not right. So over her childhood from, month 8 to about age 3 or 4, there were just a lot of difficulties to get it right. Eventually we waited till we got to Singapore for her to get her surgery on her clitoris, and we found great doctors here that helped us with that, and she's doing great at the moment. But what I'm saying is, it took her entire life for us to get it right, her medications right. And now we're at a good place where she's being medicated 4 times a day, and the doses isn't very high. And I read about people all the time that are having a lot of issues, and I just wonder if that's going to change when she becomes a teenager.
This is also Beryl's husband, Kel. Just I think another point to add on from Beryl that I think is also quite challenging, and this is, I guess, through our experience with CAH, is obviously there's the condition itself, and then the medication and treatment that we're using. But I think also, particularly finding an endo that would probably take a little bit more of a holistic approach to her treatment, and particularly sort of when we discuss some of the side effects of steroid use and things like that, and then associated issues so we're also having to work finding the right endo, and finding that right, I guess, holistic plan, because a lot of our approach we take with our daughter, and Berryl really leads this, is looking at sort of also a nutritional plan as well. So understanding the impacts of foods on her health and her system, and understanding what she can and shouldn't be eating, and then making sure that she has, I guess, a high quality nutritional plan, which we then think sort of further sort of, I guess, protects her or gives her some further coping mechanisms. And I think that it's because it is a chronic condition, and I think sometimes with chronic conditions there is sort of I get almost like this reliance of, well, it's just about medicating. But with chronic conditions, and as kids get older, medication can drop off and things like that. So having, I think, that holistic approach as well is equally as important.
Thank you. Dr. Geffner, this seems like a good time to pose this question given what Beryl's husband just mentioned. However, if other people want to chime in regarding the first question, please do so. So, to the best of all of the research that I have done and our company has done, it seems like pediatric adrenal disease patients are at especially high risk of an adrenal crisis. Certainly comorbidities for geriatric patients and whatnot put them at high risk too, but children are at especially high risk. So as a pediatric endocrinologist, I'd be interested if you could please speak to issues the children and families should especially prioritize to ensure proper treatment and emergency care. Certainly this might differ depending on where everyone is located in the world, but given your experience and global perspective, if you could chime in here.
Sure. The first thing I would tell you is what you said is obviously true. And the risk of adrenal crisis is highest in the youngest children in terms of infants and toddlers, which probably is logical in the sense because they're harder to read. They can't tell you how they feel. But there may be other sort of medical reasons why that occurs, but it's a reproducible observation when studied in large clinic populations where there's children with adrenal insufficiency. So the attention has to be perhaps greater in the younger child. And I have a philosophical approach when it comes to the whole topic of sort of avoiding adrenal crisis, and that is if a parent or guardian thinks that their child may be entering one, or even more simplistically, if they think that the child needs to be stress dosed, that you should do it. So in other words, if it crosses your mind, you probably should do it. And that goes even for the current injectable 14-step device, as hard as that sometimes is to do. There's very little chance that you can do harm by administering extra hydrocortisone, orally or by injection. There is harm you can do if you don't do it, and you should do it. So the risk of doing it, there really isn't any. But the risk of not doing it is potentially, serious. So I just, think you have to go with your gut on this one as the parent.
I muted myself, sorry. I have a dog, so I didn't want him interrupting you. And it looks like Epiphany, is that cat's name? Yeah. Epiphany has joined us with Jenna on the screen.
By the way, dogs get adrenal insufficiency too.
Yes, they're actually better diagnosed, aren't they, than human beings? It's quite interesting. I wish our device could be used in the veterinary space, but turns out the standard of care drug used is different with vets. But it is very interesting. Dogs get better care than humans sometimes in terms of accurate diagnoses. So would anyone else like to chime in terms of the discovery story or diagnosis story? I also, a follow-up question to that I have is, Sam, it sounds like maybe you have had experience, unfortunately, with needing to do the 14 steps for injecting, or at least you're familiar with them, and maybe other people on the call too. And there's this sort of paradigm or process of full treatment and advocacy, right? So like from the time the event happens to the time that maybe EMS or paramedics show up, to the time you get to the hospital, and then certainly discharge and follow-up care, anything to this end, if people would like to describe their experience in any of these different areas as it relates to emergency care, I think would be very insightful. And certainly, I think there are gaps. Maybe the experience at the hospital was fantastic, but when the EMS got there, they didn't know how to help, or there was no follow-up post-event. So I'd be very interested to hear people's thoughts here and experiences with care.
Yeah, Julia, we sort of have a similar story along that line. We had a young boy who would get a cold or a flu, and instead of getting better after a certain amount of time, he'd just get sicker and sicker. So we'd go to the local GP, they were fine with it. And then when it got too bad, we'd end up in hospital. He'd been admitted 2 or 3 times, I think, over a couple of years. And on about the 3rd admission, I said to the doctors, I said, look, something's not right here. This is just not normal, how somebody recovers from just a common flu or something that's going around, a stomach bug or a gastro. And we pushed the doctors to do a whole heap of tests. They checked for just about everything. We left the hospital, came home about 6 months later. I think we just had a standard follow-up meeting with them. And I wasn't there, I was working, but my partner went along. And they said, oh yeah, we did all these tests, we checked everything, and we found out that he's got adrenal insufficiency, Addison's disease. But for 6 months, nobody said anything to us. So we sort of, went through all the emotions that parents go through when you find out something like that. And luckily, through our communications and connections in business, we ended up with one of the top professors, endocrine professors here in Victoria. And she's now sort of led us down the path of everything. And she's actually the person who hangs at the end of the phone and says to me, man up and inject him the first time. So I think once you get the first one under your belt, it's not too bad. But that very first time when you're sitting there stressed and sort of worrying about doing everything, it is quite worrying, So we've definitely been down that path. I think misdiagnosis is a big thing, and everybody talks about it. It's awareness of people that are handling the kids, the school nurses. We had an issue where we were trying to get nurses to go to the school to teach kids with diabetes and other things how to inject the children. And there was an issue with the hospitals sending nurses to the schools. So then we had to try and get teachers and school nurses into the hospitals and stuff like that. So it's quite a struggle. And it's something that we're working on here with our health authorities and government to try and fix.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody, everyone on this call has been and is proactive in different ways in your countries, territories, towns. It's incredible all the work each of you is doing. So thank you for what you do. Ify, you've raised your hand. Would you like to go?
Okay. Mine, or like you guys own, mine is totally different here. Like there's an awareness over there, but here it's like a new thing for us here. So when my daughter came out with the ambiguous genitalia, it took us like 2 days before the endocrinologist came over and was like, your baby has CAT. That's the most likely reason that caused the ambiguous genitalia. And it wasn't an easy journey. So the endocrine insisted we should start giving her hydrocortisone and glucocortisone. Then at some point we were asked to stop the flujo and continue with hydro. It's really at some point we got frustrated with the whole thing, and out of ignorance we stopped the medication. But with we later saw that the enlarged clitoris was still growing, so we had to start all over again with the hydrocortisone. There's nothing like anything stress dose unless they are having a crisis. That's when you have to rush them down to the emergency. Unlike you guys, our medical health situation here is very, very poor. Even up to the extent, my daughter is 3 years old and we've not done the clitoris surgery that we were supposed to do right from when we gave birth to her, because there's no, as in the surgeons say I really cannot say it, but they are, with what we are seeing, that they are not doing the right thing over here. So that aside, then my son immediately my son came out. We didn't know initially that he has cat too, and his was salt wasting. And it took us like 8 months before we could tell that yes, this is cat. And already he was losing it. Everything was done, blood, everything was throwing up. It was a huge one for us. So it was when we took him to the hospital and we did that um P- last 17 um the test and everything. We now found out that yes, that he has classical too, salt wasting. So it really has not been an easy journey for us. Currently my son is a year and 6 months old, but it's not looking like one. It's not, it really has not been an easy journey for us. That's why most of the things you guys are saying here is like a new thing to me, like the 14 doses, the steps and everything, is like a new one here for me. So that has been it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that well, it's certainly not my fault, and we're trying to help as much as we can, but I still want to say sorry for the frustrations and struggles that you've had with your diagnosis stories and treatment. And I think Jenna and you have been speaking, and that's one of the amazing things about this community, a rare disease and a chronic disease community, with the internet and the support groups that do exist and the advocacy groups that do exist, that we're able to tap into one another's experiences and stories to help one another. So I'm very glad that Jenna introduced us to you, Ify. I'm glad you could join us. And, certainly I am not a doctor, but we do know a few of them. So I'm happy to connect you with people if it'll be helpful as you continue to go through this journey, and hopefully it continues to be less of a struggle for you and your family. Rachel, absolutely. Hi, Rachel. Would you like to chime in with a story or experience? But you mentioned the diagnosis took a long time for Molly. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move on to another topic?
Well, it just took too long, and Molly was poorly from 3 weeks old. And looking back now, she had a lot of symptoms. She had midline defects. She couldn't get better from a simple cold. If she got a bug, she just couldn't get better. She had no mechanisms inside her to make herself better. So from 6 weeks old, she had bronchiolitis and was in an oxygen tent. And from that time on, it was her chest that always presented, because that was her weak spot then. So she got a cold, she always ended up with chest infection, pneumonia. She came out of hospital on Christmas Eve when she was 3 after having double pneumonia. She just could not get better, and they just focused on her chest, thinking that she had a chest problem. So at one point she was under 9 different consultants, and if she'd have been sent to an endocrinologist, they would have found this problem. It was the immune people that found it in the end, because her vitamin D was very low. They did thyroid tests, and then it all started coming out. But she has no life now. She's 22 and she sits in her chair all day long. She's in pain all the time. She has chronic fatigue now, which has developed because of her being so poorly. And I basically do not know where to go or how I'm going to ever make her better. It's awful. She's now developed some kind of reaction to hydrocortisone. So she's been put on prednisolone, which is not doing her any good at all. She's even worse now on the prednisolone. So I really don't know what to do with her. She's allergic to 5 types of antibiotics because she's had so many of them that her body is just reacting against them now, which is not good for someone in her position at all. And yeah, she's seeming to do the same thing with the hydrocortisone. She's now having these reactions, like her eyes are swelling up, she's getting big headaches, but she's better on the hydrocortisone, if you know what I mean. She's better on it, but she can't take it because of these reactions she's having. So she just stays there and she's just not getting better. She's obese now. She is just has no quality of life, and it's absolutely awful.
Rachel, I'm very, very sorry. Please give Molly my best. I know we collaborate pretty frequently, especially this month. I hope together we can continue to work through a commercialized solution. And the last time I spoke with you, I cried on the call, and I'm going to try not to do that at this international scale. But yeah, I guess Dr. Geffner, as sort of a follow-up question regarding proper diagnosis and more generally, what important considerations should be entertained when improving clinical collaboration and trying to develop translational clinical research? I guess not only, from the county where Jenna lives to the county where you are in California, but also on a global scale. It's a big question. It's a hard problem, but I'd be curious your thoughts there.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think, the patient advocacy organizations are a great way to sort of get people together, just like you're doing here, although you're not necessarily a formal advocacy organization, but you may be becoming one and you don't know it. And I don't think there's a problem with too many of them. I mean, sometimes they compete, but I think everybody here knows what they are, and I'm not going to name them, but I do think that that's a great start. It's also a way of introducing people to new research that's on the horizon, as well as new products, which are linked to research. So I would say that this is a rather amazing time for the development of new medications and devices as they relate to the adrenal space. There's new ways of delivering hydrocortisone, new formulations of hydrocortisone. This is the oral daily I'm talking about, and not necessarily what you're doing, but that's on top of that. In the CAH space, there's new medications that are designed to enable patients to take lower doses of hydrocortisone. That would then, as was mentioned earlier, at least help with the part of this that's related to the side effects of the medication as opposed to the side effects of the condition. And then, as many of you probably know, there's a company out there that's about to begin trials of gene therapy for the CAH space to maybe make the condition go away. And so, in the last 5 years, there's been a boom of new developments here, and now even more that I never saw in the first 35 years of being in this business. It's just a fantastic explosion, and the organizations introduce the people, potentially the members, to these things if they don't find out on their own, and so that's sort of how I would respond to that question, assuming that I answered what you were asking.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. That works. It was a hard question. So, Solution is a drug delivery company. We are choosing to tackle the very complicated issues of adrenal disease by making a tangible product to solve a critical unmet need. However, we have linked in with a handful of advocacy groups around the world, with the idea that we won't rewrite the advocacy book, but we can utilize the communities that already exist. So with that in mind, if anyone on the call now or anyone who tunes in and watches has questions or would like a connection with any of those groups, we can do that. I claim to be an expert in what we are working on, but I am not necessarily an expert with what each of these groups does, and each group kind of has its own niche. Some focus more on different types of chronic care and ways to administer that. Some focus on the psychosocial aspect of chronic and rare diseases. Some are CAH specific. Some are just the umbrella of adrenal diseases. So, and these are all around the world. So definitely feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best to connect you with the right groups if you're not already connected with them. All right, it's 10:43. Some of you need to start work. Some of you probably want to go to sleep. And then everything. Yes, thank you, Sam. I understand. So I guess I'll ask one final question kind of to wrap up, and everyone feel free to chime in. So, in most cases, and this isn't always true depending on the disease or condition, but in most cases, it's rare diseases that cause people to be at risk for an adrenal crisis. Certainly Addison's is rare, CAH is rare. Something like taking an inhaler for too long and killing your adrenal glands is not so rare. However, there isn't a lot of recognition as that being a cause for adrenal crisis. So exogenous steroid use is its own problem. But how have you and your family handled this rarity or this difference in a community of people and really the world where, you know, if they're not in your shoes per se, or don't understand this problem, maybe they aren't willing to listen or help or empathize. You know, in many cases, people with adrenal disease don't look sick until they are very, very sick and there is a significant problem, and then no one really knows how to help. So if anyone wants to speak, like certainly, for example, Jenna, you've used your experiences to advocate and educate within your community, and same with Rachel, same with Sam, pretty much everybody on this call in different ways. So if you'd like to speak with that as a way to close up, I think it would help us end on an optimistic and actionable note here.
Hi, Julia. It's Berryl.
Hi, Berryl.
Hi. I guess the way I've dealt with it is not ever leaving my daughter for a minute. I know it's a very strange way, but I think maybe people around me would think of me as being overprotected because they see that she looks healthy and strong and is very sporty. But her entire life, I've been there with the meds, or my husband has been there with the meds. It's almost like we just, people around us don't understand why we don't ever let her be alone for a moment, you know? So I think that's been our coping mechanism. Now that she's older and can tell you when she's going into a crisis, then things have started to change a bit, where we could give the meds to others to help her out at some point. And she can give me a call and let me know how she's feeling. So her life, now she's 8, her life is now changing a little bit now that she can tell us when something's wrong. But we've had one hospital visit when she was, what, 3?
3, yeah.
3 years old. And the most difficult thing was to convince a regular doctor at the hospital that she was going into adrenal crisis. And I think everybody has the same experience, right? Yep. So, yeah. So I feel like, number one, you treat as much as you can at home before you go to the hospital, right? So you inject if you have to before you go to the hospital, you give meds. You do whatever you can before you go to the hospital, because you have no idea what you're going to meet up with when you get there. A couple of times I've had to wait in the emergency department, and thankfully she hasn't gone too deep into an adrenal crisis. But I thought, you know, these were very important moments, and there's just no way for us to make them understand that what an adrenal crisis is. So we need more education for emergency care, I think.
Yeah, I think the other thing, and this is something that some of the support groups have been very good at, because I think everyone's sort of sharing. But even, you know, like we developed very simple one-sheeters that, you know, for her school nurses, you know, when, you know, she's now doing swimming lessons and tennis camps. So there's very much like, there's a lot of conversations we have, so people are aware, and having these very simple one-sheeters with, you know, it's almost like a flow chart to go, if you're seeing this, give it this, call us immediately, or we're usually around in those environments as well. But I think even just being able to have that very simple information. And I think the other point that we've worked really hard at is we engage people in the conversations that were part of her care and say, look, you know, it's a chronic condition. It can be life-threatening, but it also doesn't stop her from doing anything. And therefore, it's really important that they understand that it's manageable, and we're asking their help to help her manage it, and just be aware of any signs and things. And it's little small things, like, she does 3 hours of tennis, and we just say to the tennis instructor, she literally has to drink 3 times the amount of water as anyone else, water and salt. So therefore, she needs to be given, more water breaks than other kids. And it's just, I think it's just, understanding those things, but being able to provide that information quite simply and effectively is important.
I was an athlete when I was younger too, and I can appreciate what you're saying. One of my parents was also around always. Goodness forbid there was an issue, and I don't know. Not everybody does what you're doing and takes this condition as seriously, and does the personal education, and then educating others, that work that is necessary. So kudos to both of you for doing that. There are a handful of organizations that do have templates for these emergency letters and other things. If you're not already familiar with them, I'd be happy to follow up and give you some of that info. There's also a newer QR code that's being used for scanning for the injection instructions. I know there's a few apps that are currently in process to deal with this as well, all in development. So certainly I'm happy to share resources with anybody here.
Yeah, the QR code would be very, very useful if you could share that.
Sure. Yeah, I can follow up.
And Julia, your EpiPen idea will really, listening to Berryl and her partner, when you send your kid to somebody's house for a play date or on the sporting ground, that's where that EpiPen would be amazing, so that you don't have to worry about all of that. They just do it like they would for any anaphylaxis.
That's the goal. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying not to pitch our work too much on this.
No, keep it up.
On this platform, that your voices are what matters. The voices and stories of the people whose lives we're working to save are what matters here. But thank you. I appreciate the plug a little bit. That's fantastic.
I think that it's really really important to help, to get this pen developed, because I have so many letters and emails every week from people whose children are in school, and the schools will not administer the injection, even though it is legal to administer this injection, because it's a life-saving injection. So there are no legal comebacks, but this isn't available news. People don't know this fact, and workplaces as well. I mean, Molly doesn't go anywhere anyway, so it's easy for me because I'm always with her. But if she was a normal 22-year-old and she was out all the time, I'd literally be terrified, because she wouldn't be able to do it herself when she's going into any kind of crisis. It's just not, it's unbelievable. It doesn't exist. When Mol was diagnosed, I was sat there holding my hand out for a quick pen device, and they came out with the syringe and the glass vial and everything else, and I just couldn't believe that it didn't exist in this day and age already. It was such a shock. So I think that is going to make people so much safer, and we need to advocate for ourselves and for our children, because it's such a rare thing. People just aren't aware of it. So we need to do our best to make sure that they're safe until a time when people do understand it a little bit better.
Well, I'd like to just echo what the other parents said too, that I think whenever we got our children's diagnosis, whether we naturally were or not, we instantly became a helicopter parent who has to hover, because there's so much training required for anyone to care for our children. And it just feels over the top sometimes. And just training teachers recently, where I had to say, here's what to look for. And it sounds so terrifying. And then I keep going back and forth between the, this is life-threatening, she could die. But she's well managed and it probably won't happen, but she could die. And trying to find the balance between that, because things can be so normal most of the time and then deteriorate so suddenly. and getting people to understand that seriousness while not being too afraid of doing what needs to be done is a very difficult line to walk. And it makes things as simple as camps, sleepovers, sports, all those things that should be normal parts of growing up just very complicated. And then it also makes that all the fears and anxieties of, one day your children should leave the house and start their own life, and that should be exciting and scary for parents and youth alike. But there's kind of a paralyzing fear that comes with it for us. And it feels like it doesn't need to be this way. It feels like the world should be better equipped to manage our adrenal insufficient patients' care, and we're just not there yet. So my hope is that that yet will not be something we'll have to say anymore. And then, 10 years from now, we'll say, things improved, and doctors and EMTs and ambulances and teachers and school nurses all feel equipped, and there's medications and devices that make this easier. So go team.
Yes, everyone on this call is a part of a very big team, and I'm glad we're all able to be here today to talk about this. Last 5 minutes, would anyone else like to chime in before we all sign off and go to bed or start our days or prepare for dinner, depending on where we all are?
That's me. Can we keep it going a bit longer so I don't have to cook the dinner?
I don't know. I don't think Sam will like that very much. He wants to go to bed. It's 2 a.m.
No, oh dear, no, that's not right.
Yeah, just so no pressure here, but if anyone else wants to chime in before we sign off, certainly Dr. Geffner, if you have any last words for this meeting anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's pretty special to have you joining us as a group and get your perspective as a doctor and a prescriber and someone who saves people's lives every day.
Yeah, I do have to start seeing patients in like 2 minutes, but
Yes.
I think Jenna really eloquently laid it out just a moment ago, and not just because we're both in California, but I mean, she really summarized the issues and that everybody faces. And I would just say, in the United States, if you have an emergency related to adrenal insufficiency and you call the paramedics, there's less than 10 states in the country that actually stock emergency hydrocortisone on their vehicles. And in many states, including California, they're technically not allowed to use even patient-held medication. So making something that would be easy to use, it could be used by parents, or even patients sometimes themselves when they're older, to ward off something that's evolving. It would just be life-saving, because you can't rely on the paramedics in the United States. It's a problem. And it's just so having such a product, again, putting in the plug would I would save lives. I mean, that's the bottom line. And comfort people, to allow their kids to go sleep over somewhere. All of this has been so well stated, and I feel the emotions of the people on the call, and I've heard all the stories. I've never lived through it exactly, obviously, but this is needed, and anything I personally can do to help going forward, please feel free to call upon me, because I feel strongly about this. And I know everybody on this call surely does.
Thank you, Dr. Geffner. Well, being here is one of those things, and I know you set time aside to do this before a very busy day. So yeah, I guess for the sake of everyone's schedules, we've got 2 minutes to go. So from my perspective, I know Sawyers might say a few words, but Dr. Geffner, Jenna, Ify, Berryl, Rachel, and Sam, and sorry Shaffali couldn't join us if she watches this recording in the future, but maybe next time. Thank you all for taking time out of your days, mornings, afternoons, and very late evenings to have this conversation It's really important, and things like this and more things like this, it's, I don't think yet is too far away, but it's things like this that make that so. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you for hosting.
Absolutely.
Thank you for hosting, Julia.
Yeah.
Julia, Dr. Geffner, and everybody, Sam, Jenna, Berryl, Ify, Rachel, thank you very much once again for your time, your participation in the very informational and educational conversation on adrenal crisis, and also sharing some very, very powerful personal stories. Julia, to you and your team at Solution Medical, congratulations on all important work, efforts, and initiatives, all groundbreaking research and product development, focusing on helping fellow people to deal with the condition effectively and efficiently. Also, people from the audience are saying that they can't wait for Solution Medical's solution to be made available to everybody, hopefully soon enough. You are really a star, making our world better and brighter. Thank you very much, everybody. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great morning, a great day, and a great sleep.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.